Well, before we see if Mage can win the Preakness Stakes, we have to look at Friday and the Black-Eyed Susan. I'm Colin Sheehan, he's Matt DeSantis, and we are going to do our first look at the Black-Eyed Susan. What's up, everybody? My name is Colin Sheehan. Welcome back to Trust the Profits YouTube page. Please like and subscribe. We have so much content continuing to come down the rails for you, led by the content train himself, Matthew DeSantis at Phil DeMenace on Twitter. Matt, you're killing it. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're all killing it here on the channel, and we're thrilled to have somebody new join us, and Jessica Tugwell, who's got her new weekly series, The Pedigree Puzzle, that does a deep dive into different horses' pedigree. She did Mage this last week. Can't wait to see what she does next week. Those are great little, 6 to 8 minute videos. Unlike me, she's not long-winded. There's a lot of great content there, and obviously all the stuff you're doing, the formula, El Hombre, myself, we got you covered. Triple Crown, we got you covered going into the summer at Saratoga. We got live betting. We got international coverage. We got domestic coverage. Anything you want in horse racing, right here. Trust the Profits.
And we got huge news coming out in about a month or so. So make sure you stay tuned for that, because it's going to be something really exciting that we're really pumped about working on behind the scenes. But first, before we get to that, let's do what we've done. We've been doing it for the males. We have to do it for the females now as well. This is a first look at the Black-Eyed Susan. The big story, of course, is a horse who I think is the top of this division, and that is a horse by the name of Faiza, trained by Bob Baffert. And Faiza could give Baffert his record-tying 4th victory in this race. Dwayne Lucas, Todd Pletcher, and Sonny Fitzsimmons are the other 3 trainers to have 4. So obviously a storyline there, but just in and of itself, with Faiza returning for Bob Baffert, that's where all attention is heading. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. I mean, there's a variety of reasons all the attention is going to be headed on this horse. First, it's Bob Baffert coming back. Obviously, the 2-year suspension at Churchill in terms of the Kentucky Derby is now over. And so Bob Baffert is back. He has National Treasure running in the Preakness the next day. But this is a huge storyline. Obviously, Bob coming to Pimlico, which has been very good to him. He's won the Preakness a record-tying 7 times. He's won the Black-Eyed Susan 3 times. He's got a lot of success here. And then we'd also be talking about Faiza, even if she was trained by me, because she is an outstanding filly. And we have not seen, and we talked a lot about this when we talked about the Kentucky Oaks Trail, overwhelming fillies in this particular crop. There have been a lot of nice fillies, certainly a horse like Pretty Mischievous, obviously turning in a great effort in the Kentucky Oaks, but Faiza is that kind of dominant 5-for-5 undefeated filly that reminds you a little bit more of last year's crop with Nest and Echo Zulu and Secret Oath and horses like that. So, she certainly from a pedigree standpoint, from a name standpoint, kind of towers over this field, but there's some other really big names and really interesting horses in this race.
Will Faiza be the favorite?
Oh, I think so, by a long shot. I think so. I mean, she's got the record, she's got the connections. People are going to be enamored with that 5-for-5, that perfect undefeated record. She's done nothing wrong. She keeps getting better. Actually, she keeps pulling away further and further from her competition. So, and then you add in the Baffert factor. I think she's going to be the no doubt about it favorite in this race.
So I led you. This is like a lawyer leading the questioning. Did you know that in the last 17 runnings of this race, only one favorite has won? And that is 2011 Royal Delta. And that's a pretty remarkable statistic. But what I always like to say is don't get caught up in previous year's statistics and trends, because that can change. And if you followed like me, I got a little iffy on Mage with the not having races at 2, and I liked Mage, and that previous trend kind of was the tipping point in me taking Mage off my ticket. So don't let that stuff in the past affect what's happening this year. You got to take every race, like Jessica says, it's a puzzle, and take them all unique. So it's an interesting stat, and I just thought I'd throw it out there because we're here to entertain.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting stat, and I think, but to your point, every year is different to every other year. If this was an average year, Faiza would have been in the Kentucky Oaks and probably would not be wheeling back around for the Black-Eyed Susan. It's very rare to have a situation where a horse was prohibited from entering the Kentucky Oaks, who most people thought would be among the 1 or 2 favorites in that race, held out. Obviously, now coming to the Black-Eyed Susan, this is not kind of the second cut, so to speak, of the filly crop at this 3-year-old group. I mean, this is a very, very good horse. So again, a little bit of a unique factor kind of playing into what's going to happen ultimately this year on the board.
So we have a field of 12. You mentioned the Oaks, so I'll bring it up now. And that is that in Tell Me No Lies was the horse that was running out west against Faiza. Finished second to Faiza in the Santa Anita Oaks. And the race previous to that, in Tell Me No Lies, did not show up at the Oaks, finishing 12th. If you're playing that little who's played who's raced against who game, does that give you any insight or pause on Faiza, or is it all systems go?
I think that is the one moment of pause that you can have is when you look at Faiza's career, she really hasn't faced much. And that's not her fault. I mean, she can't control the other horses in the race. She can only beat who's out there. What I do like about Faiza is that she has been increasingly dominant in her efforts, going from winning by a half a length to winning by 2.5 lengths to winning by 6.5 lengths left time out over a horse like And Tell Me No Lies. So that last effort, I mean, she was blowing out a horse that, obviously did not run that particularly well with the travel and trying a new track and getting to Churchill for the first time, did not run that well. So I'd be more concerned if she was like neck and neck with that type of a horse, like just barely winning those types of races. I'd be like, this is a little dicey if we've seen this happen before. But I think, it does give you a pause. She's faced some horses that have come back to become actually decent turf horses. If you go back and look at some of her past races, there's some horses that have gone on to be stakes winners and stakes placed horses in turf races. But, so in terms of just the overall caliber and class of horse is not bad, but obviously not on the right surface for those horses who made the surface switch after facing her. So, that California circuit was weak, but I think one of the things we talked about throughout the Oaks season was a lot of circuits were kind of weak. It wasn't overwhelming. And so I think fairgrounds and Oaklawn were kind of where a lot of us were looking, not just for the boys, but for the girls too. So, in that regard, it's kind of par for the course with what you might see out of New York or Florida or some of these other circuits.
Yeah, and that East versus West came up. Whenever I need my info, I go to Matt DeSantis' Twitter page, and he posted the field today, and I thought it would just be a Faiza love fest. But look at this. We got some Angry Yankee liking Sacred Wish. Steph is on Go Miracle. Diane's on Hoosier Philly. Jimmy Johnson mentioned Faiza, but also Merlazza. I know that's a horse you like. Jessica likes Taxed. And what I'm getting to here is you're not seeing Faiza everywhere. And Christopher here had the good comment about you have that great storyline of Baffert versus Todd and Brad and East versus West, which is exactly what you had just talked about. But then as we continue down, this got a lot of traction. This is where we start just seeing pics of Faiza, Taxed, Faiza single, Faiza. So it wasn't as overwhelmingly Faiza as I would have considered when you look at this field. So I guess that leads me to my next question, which is we have a field of 12. We've talked about how impressive Faiza is. Whenever I see Hoosier Philly, I just think about I jumped on. He had a superior 2-year-old season and then came back as a 3-year-old and is working out like crazy. I mean, the works on this horse on the bottom of the page, you're like, oh my God, how can this horse just loves getting up and running and doing the workouts, but then at least in the last 2 has not shown up. So we can either start there with Hoosier Philly, or who else in this field that you look at are you kind of interested in?
Yeah, I think starting with Hoosier Philly makes a lot of sense because she's coming out of the same circuit that produced the Kentucky Oaks champion, Pretty Mischievous. So you could make an argument that Hoosier Philly's just been facing better competition and being, obviously being easily defeated by a horse like Pretty Mischievous is not, it really reflects maybe a little bit better on her now. This will be third back in the form cycle. You're right. If you look at the workouts, she's stunning. I mean, you would think she's going to blow the field out. I mean, you're looking at 58-4 5 furlong workouts. That is just, at Churchill Downs on May 12th. I mean, that's just an incredible work for any type of horse, let alone a 3-year-old filly. So listen, she's come out of a strong circuit. I was never all in on her. I was always skeptical because the speed figures never matched the hype. And that's kind of what we saw when she came back. The speed figures still weren't really there. She didn't take that step forward as a 3-year-old. And what really is concerning is that she actually took a step backward last time out from a speed figure standpoint. So, I think it's a little bit concerning when you see something like that from a filly. But people love her. People are going to bet her. She's going to get bet down from whatever her morning line is. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah, and here we have the best speed figures and the last speed figures, and we've talked how we've kind of seen Faiza heading above, but the speed figures aren't actually that far ahead and
No.
above for how much we're giving her credit for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 89 last time out, which was her best effort. So you obviously like to see her trending in the right direction. But you see a horse like Taxed did pretty much the same thing. 85 last time out. That was also her best effort. So not all that far behind. You see some other horses in there. You know, Miracle had a really big run down there at the Rachel Alexandra, posted an 86 buyer. Even a horse like Balpool posted an 84 before. And last time out. So it's not as dominant there. And certainly, if you look at that buyer speed figure, you know, they're all around that kind of like low to mid 80 area. And so there's absolutely an opportunity for these horses to take a step forward. What I will say is, when you start looking at their last time out, that's when I think you can start separating a few horses maybe from being like real serious contenders. So you see a horse like Merlazza and Taxed and Balpool, who all posted 80 plus buyers last time out. So you know they're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we've talked about it on this show, the prime power number. If there's a 10-point difference, that's really kind of where you separate your easy singles versus not. Here you have Faiza over Miracle and Hoosier Philly by 8 points. So again, it was like, you know, Faiza is the one we talked about. We're so excited to see run back with the head of the class. But when you're looking at kind of the numbers on the sheet of paper, whether it's prime power, whether it's Brisnet speed figures, whether it's buyer figures, they're not as over the top as we kind of think in our head is kind of the point that I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Faiza obviously a comfortable leader here from a prime power standpoint, but by no means a lock, you know, in terms of that
Right.
10 plus point spread. And then you see kind of similar to what we saw in the buyer speed figures, everybody else is kind of right there. Like there's not a huge gap between a horse like Miracle and even a horse like Comparative or Towhead, who's a little further down. So they're all really close to each other. And I think that speaks to just how kind of balanced this crop is, and the fact that this is a really strong field. And depending on what metrics you're using, Faiza may not seem that overwhelming and might just seem like she's just another horse to consider in that regard.
Let's talk about Tax, because this is a horse that's kind of gotten, aside from Faiza, a lot of the attention, at least on Matt DeSantis' Twitter, which, as I said,
might be
that
biased.
is, you know, back in the day when you had the guy ringing the bell on the side of the corner selling the papers, that's kind of what I equate Matt DeSantis' Twitter to these days. So that's where the headlines are at, and that's where I'm going to go. So everyone's talking about Tax. This is kind of the darling, as you mentioned prior. Obviously, this horse won a maiden claimer at Churchill Downs November 20th with T-Gap aboard. The Brisnet speed figures there in the middle have a trend that me and you both always kind of fall for, which is increasing in the right direction, which is up. Has raced at a mile in the 16th 4 times, hasn't done the mile in 8th, which this race is. Where's your interest on Taxed?
You know, it's interesting. She obviously finished second to Wet Paint twice. Wet Paint, of course, went off as the favorite in the Kentucky Oaks, and you know, ran a halfway decent race. Ran the type of race we thought she might have to run, and you know, just had too much traffic, and you know, obviously wasn't able to do it on a track like Oaklawn. But you know, Taxed finished right behind. I think the promising thing for Taxed is that last effort in the fantasy. Where you saw this horse kind of sit a little bit more, be a little bit further back, and then make a little bit of a run. More importantly, doing it on a dry, fast track. That was something that plagued that Oaklawn circuit the entire winter. It seemed like it was always sloppy, always rainy, always miserable conditions. And so there were a lot of horses that took huge step forwards once they finally got on a dry, fast track. I think of a horse like Defining Purpose, who came back to win the Ashland after being stuck on the muck in Oaklawn for the winter. So I think that if you look at that last effort in the fantasy, very, very good effort there for sure. I think the issue with Taxed is I don't know what type of trip she's going to end up getting. And I mean that by saying there's a lot of horses that all want to run the same type of trip. And she could face a lot of pressure, and she could face a lot of just contestation the whole way around. And going now an extra half furlong might be a little much for her, but certainly trending in the right direction.
Yep, and Brisnet run style is exactly leading to that as well. As you see a lot of horses that have that EP style, but you don't have the 7 or the 8s. You have a lot of 5 and 6s. And same thing with the horses that are going to be coming from behind. One of the horses that I am intrigued by, once you get past Faiza, is Comparative. Comparative is the horse that I've sort of circled as maybe this is, you know, we do our our value. Whenever I see a Godolphin owned and bred horse trained by Brad Cox, I immediately kind of take a deeper look. This horse clearly is okay with the distance because she has only been running, starting off at the mile and running at a mile 16th. We talked about how we love those increasing speed figures, but it also seems like this horse figured something out. And I know
Yeah.
it hasn't run at a graded stakes level as some of these other horses have. And that's obviously concern, especially when you have a horse like Faiza who's won a grade 1, a grade 2, and a grade 3. This horse, so last out, was an optional claimer, but it likes to be close to the front, right? The last two races are more indicative of maybe how this horse can be successful. It's funny, I joked once the horse tossed Colby Hernandez off on that race December 31st. It's like, oh, I figured out what I'm supposed to do here. I'm supposed to keep the rider on my back, and they're going to keep me close, and maybe that's where I'm going to perform better. You have to be, you have to respect anything coming out of the Brad Cox barns these days. I love that Saiz stays aboard. Was Comparative anybody that's maybe going to hit your value play?
Yeah, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, certainly, like you said, kind of trending the right direction. I think from a buyer speed figure standpoint, might need to take obviously another step forward. But Brisnet looks like she's right there, and I think that you're right. Something clicked for her. And that's always, you can't quantify that sometimes with a horse, that it just happens. Sometimes it's a long layoff that does it. Sometimes it's a certain event. Sometimes they just figure something out for the first time. They go, oh yeah, I got to do this. And clearly she's figured something out, or Cox has figured something out with her. She's got Louis Saez aboard. Saez is staying on her for this race. It's hard not to trust somebody like Saez in this sort of a spot. She's always attracted money in her races. If you go back, she's always been among, usually the post-time favorite. And she's been working out dynamite. I mean, that last 47-2 4 furlong work, bullet at Keeneland on May 13th. So she's feeling fresh. She's feeling good. And she's coming in on about 5 or 6 weeks rest. So, I think she makes a lot of sense. And you will probably get a price on the morning line on her just because she's never faced that sort of graded stakes competition before.
Yeah, this might be a tough leap for this horse, but certainly one that you might want to throw in your virtual stable, especially if she runs good in the Black Eyed Susan, for something that you maybe look further down the line. Is probably where I'm kind of having my attention focused on Comparative. How about yourself? Is there anybody else in the field that maybe other than Faiza who you're kind of eyeing as a long shot?
I don't think Merlazza is going to be very big long shot. I think she'll probably end up being like pretty reasonable price, probably like 4-1, 5-1 by the time post time takes place. So I don't know about that. She's a really intriguing horse, though, in that she does kind of keep getting better. It's interesting. I know Brisnet had her kind of taking a step back in that last Valley of the Vapors race. And I know Equibase had her taking a step back from a speed figure standpoint. Bayer didn't see it as a step back. She kind of plateaued essentially. It had an 81 the previous race, 82 in the Valley of the Vapors. I like that she's won a few different ways. Like she's won sitting super close. She's also won sitting a little further back. Joel Rosario, brilliant ride to get her there at the end. Has faced graded stakes company and really hasn't done anything wrong since that debut effort against a horse I really liked that day as well. So, and you made a really interesting point, was that everything turned around for when they took the blinkers off of her.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cox actually had this horse pointed to this race. In one of the quotes I read, that this was kind of the one that he thought would be a good fit. And he actually mentioned that he thought that this horse would be better suited for the mile and an eighth opposed to the mile. So although we saw that step back in the mile, if you do a little looking into what Cox has said, it makes sense. And this horse wants to go longer. So I don't know that you necessarily think of that mile as as a step back, and she's showing her best at the 88th. At the 88, at least using Brisnet. I think that another opportunity to step forward is certainly there for this horse.
I think another one, another one that I'm interested in that I didn't talk to you about ahead of time, but that I may try to take a shot on is Frostio Tool for Pletcher. And the logic here is, that last time out in the Gazelle was a first time for Pletcher. And it was a transfer barks from Mike Denny to Pletcher. And she's run the mile and an eighth before. Now you could say she didn't look great doing it. And you're not wrong in saying that. But my argument here is we just saw Gambling Girl run up for a really impressive second place coming out of that Gazelle. Maybe that Gazelle is a little bit better than we were giving it credit for. Maybe that New York circuit wasn't that bad. And so, maybe this is not a bad horse to consider. Frostio Tool was also in the same barn as Gambling Girl, which was another Pletcher horse. So, interesting that he brings this one back. I mean, I definitely think Miracle is going to be the Pletcher that attracts a little bit more money because of that really good effort at the Rachel Alexandra. But I don't know. I think Frostio Tool could be a really big price, and you might be able to get a little something there.
Why don't you tell that to my double and down fans who absolutely ripped me apart for picking Promisor America on my double card for the Oaks Derby double, and told me that Promisor America would need every other horse to be tied up, and they have to give her a tractor in order to get to the finish line first. So
where did Promisor America finish that day? I don't even know. I forget where
question.
She finished in the Oaks, but Gambling Girl ran like hell. I mean, she's become one of my personal favorites just because when you see Gambling Girl, she looks like a $30,000 maiden claimer at Chucktown. I mean, she does not look like this sort of amazing horse, but when you get her on the track, man, she runs and she is gangly, and she still has a lot of room to fill out. She's going to be really, really good when she gets older, I think. So, but yeah, I don't know, like Frostio Tool, Miracle. I mean, those are horses that I think have a race maybe to run back to, and it might do all right.
All right, time to put the rubber to the ground. We take a page out of the Capping the Card, which Matt DeSantis does on Thursday or Fridays, where he goes through an entire card and gives you a top pick and a value play. It's a superb show. He's got the graphics up. You can slide through quickly and see who he and his guests like. And you do a really superb job on not only the content, but also the picks, which is what's most important. So let's see if we can bring that onto this show. Who is your top pick for the 2023 Black-Eyed Susan being run at Pimlico?
I'm not going to overthink this, and I'm just going to go with Faiza as my top pick. I think there's a lot of reasons to think that she's sitting on a big race. I think that the progression is right there. The fact that she just keeps getting better and better. The margin of victory keeps getting more impressive. She just seems to keep doing it better and better each time. And then there's the Baffert effect. Listen, I did a video about Bob Baffert's, I kind of jokingly call it the revenge tour, but the idea is like, he's back. And if you don't think he wants to win everything, he's always wanted to win everything. But if you don't think there's a little extra behind it now, you're wrong. I mean, Bob Baffert wants to reassert his dominance over the Classic division. And I think doing it on Black-Eyed Susan Day and tying a record would not be a bad way to do it. So I'll go with Faiza as my top pick.
Yeah, I'm not going to overthink it either. Sometimes I usually try to overthink it, and I'm not going to hear. This would probably be a race I just watched, to be honest. I'd be intrigued to watch Faiza. I might try and exact a Faiza over my value play, which we'll get to in a second. But if you listen to Bob Baffert's comments in regards to his Preakness opportunities and his Black-Eyed Susan opportunities, they are very different tone. And I think he's coming here to roll with Faiza. He thinks this horse is what we all have seen. And we'll pass on what the paper says, which is maybe it's closer than it really is. You do have to worry about the travel. It's always something that maybe you have to think about. But Faiza is the top pick here for me as well. Where are you going for value?
It's funny. I'm actually probably going to go to a horse we didn't even talk about, which is the Inside Rail Sacred Wish. This is a horse coming off a second place finish in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, which admittedly was not a huge race, but featured a horse like Miracle, which is probably going to be a lower price than Sacred Wish. She's got speed. She's got the inside rail. If she can get away quickly, she's got Johnny Velasquez aboard. I think he's going to give her a front running type of a ride. And this is a horse that took a huge step up from running in a state restricted maiden special weight race to almost winning a grade 2 Gulfstream Park Oaks second time out. So, I mean, the horse took a massive progression just from class. Now the speed figures remain pretty steady, but I think you're going to get a really big price on her. And I'm going to use her underneath probably in a couple of exactas, trifectas.
Angry Yankee will be happy, as we saw on your Twitter. So
yeah, he will be. Yeah,
we'll tweet him out on this. I'm going to take a shot with Comparative. I hope that what I saw in the last race was maybe what this horse is capable of, at least from a speed figure standpoint. As I said, the Godolphin trained and breeder and owned angle is one that I have started to pay a lot more attention to. It's one that Vinny's got me on, and it's like, man, every time they beat you, you're like, there it is again. And this horse, I just think that last race, I know it was an optional claimer. I know we're jumping up to a grade 2 race. But the fact that she's been running at 1 1/16 every single race consistently. I like the fact of stretching out, especially the way she closed and inched ahead in that last race. So I don't know what I'll get for a price. As you mentioned, that workout, 1 out of 76 on May 13th at Keeneland, was 2 out of 28 in the workout before that. I think this horse is showing some growth that I want to put underneath Faiza. So that'll be my exacta.
And you'll get a price, because if you go through the field, Taxt is going to take money. Hoosier Philly is going to take money. Merlazza is going to take money. We know Faiza is going to take a ton of money. So Miracle's going to probably take a little bit of money. So now you're already up to like your 4th, 5th, 6th choice potentially. You're going to get a decent price on Comparative, and there's worse odds to bet on than Brad Cox and Godolphin on a big day. That's not a bad bet.
I learned that from capping the card.
You should just learn that from common sense. I don't need to teach you that. You know that yourself.
Very good. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up this show?
Just to say, if you're out there at Pimlico on Friday for Black Eyed Susan Day and you see me wandering around, come say hi. I'd love to see you. I'll be out there at the track on Black Eyed Susan Day. Should be lovely weather. It looks like there was a forecast for rain earlier in the week, but it looks like it's cleared up. So clear skies for Friday. Should be nice conditions. Make sure to swing by, say hi if you see me. I'd love to say hi and just chat with you a little bit and get to know where you're from, and love talking ponies with people.
I didn't know you were going. Your calendar for this year is just filling up week by week.
Listen, I live in Northern Virginia, so it's an hour and 20-minute drive up to Pimlico. It's not that bad. I can do it in a day, and I don't have to stay up there or anything like that. And so I'll be up there, but be at the Haskell. I'll be at the Jim Dandy weekend. I'll be at Charlestown Classic. I'll be at the Pennsylvania Derby. So yeah, I'll be out and around. Living in the Mid-Atlantic has its advantages. You get to kind of be all over the place. Having friends who live in Saratoga is an advantage as well. So shout out to my buddy Anders. So
and to all you viewers out there, when you see Matt, you still have the opportunity to get certificate 001 on a signed picture from him. So I haven't heard about any you've given away yet. So if anybody wants to get the very first signed picture of Matt DeSantis before he goes big time, if you see him, make sure you ask him. But until then, Matt,
it's now post time.